My name is Naomi Carter. I was born in Denver, Colorado, but life eventually led me to settle in the vibrant city of Atlanta, Georgia. I had always been a planner, meticulous, cautious, never one to take unnecessary risks. Growing up, faith was a part of my life, though I wouldn't say I was deeply spiritual. I believed in God, but I was too caught up in the busyness of life to dwell on eternity. That all changed the day I died. I was 31, expecting my second child, a son. My firstborn, Ella, was 5 years old and had been praying every night for a baby brother. My husband, Marcus, and I were beyond excited. The pregnancy had been smooth, almost too perfect. My checkups were routine, my vitals strong. My doctor had assured me that everything was progressing beautifully. There was no reason to suspect that within hours of delivering my son, I would cross over to the other side and witness something that would change me forever. The morning of my scheduled delivery was filled with nervous excitement. My family was there, my husband, my sister Lauren, my mother, and even my best friend Maya, who had flown in from Texas just to be by my side. The plan was simple, a C-section, quick and routine, and then I'd be holding my son in my arms. I remember the sterile chill of the operating room, the beeping monitors, and the soft murmurs of the surgical team preparing for the procedure. My doctor, Dr. Patel, had delivered Ella 5 years prior, and I trusted him completely. The procedure began as expected. Pressure, tugging sensations, but no pain. Then, at precisely 10:42 a.m., the sweetest sound filled the room, my son's first cry. Tears streamed down my face as they placed him briefly on my chest before taking him for a routine check. Marcus kissed my forehead, whispering, "You did it, love. He's perfect." The room hummed with quiet activity as the nurses checked my son's vitals. The air smelled of antiseptic and fresh linen, but I barely noticed. My heart was full. I had just brought a perfect little soul into the world. But then something changed. A strange pressure built in my chest, not painful, but wrong. It felt as though an invisible weight had settled over me, pressing down, squeezing. My breaths became shallow. At first, I thought it was exhaustion, the lingering effects of the anesthesia, but then my vision flickered. A rushing sound filled my ears, like waves crashing on a distant shore. "Marcus!" My voice was barely above a whisper. He was still gazing at our son, his eyes brimming with pride. When he turned to me, the joy on his face faded instantly. "Honey, what's wrong?" He grabbed my hand, his fingers trembling. Something was terribly wrong. My body felt heavy, as if a great weight had settled upon my chest. The voices around me were becoming distant, muffled, like I was submerged underwater. The beeping of the monitors quickened, an erratic symphony of urgency. I could hear Marcus's voice, frantic, calling my name. But I couldn't answer. I wanted to, but my lips wouldn't move. A cold, creeping sensation spread through my veins. The weight on my chest became unbearable, like an unseen force pressing me down into the operating table. A strange warmth surged through my body, then vanished, leaving me cold, so unbearably cold. The voices around me were distant echoes, swallowed by a rushing wind that roared in my ears. Then, in an instant, everything went silent. The beeping of the heart monitor flatlined. A piercing, shrill tone filled the room. "We're losing her." I was vaguely aware of the chaos unfolding around me. The sudden rush of feet, the sharp commands of the doctors, the whooshing sound of a crash cart being wheeled into place. Hands pressed down hard on my chest, once, twice, over and over. A voice called my name desperately, but I was slipping further, beyond reach. Charging clear. A violent jolt surged through me, pulling me back for the briefest moment. My body convulsed, but I felt none of it. Another shock. Then another. Darkness wrapped itself around me, pulling me down like a relentless tide. The effort to hold on was slipping through my grasp like grains of sand. "Come back. Stay with us." The world around me faded completely, and the last thing I heard was Marcus screaming my name. Time passed, though I had no concept of how much. The doctors fought, pushing against the inevitable, their voices growing heavier with despair. 45 minutes had gone by, and nothing had changed. My body lay there lifeless, unresponsive to every shock, every desperate plea. The room stilled. The head physician stepped back, a grim expression settling on his face. "We've done everything we can. There's no pulse. We have to call it." The words sliced through the room like a dagger. My mother collapsed into a chair, sobbing into her hands. Marcus dropped to his knees, clutching my motionless hand in his own, his lips moving in silent, desperate prayer. My sister stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief, shaking her head violently as if denying reality itself. A nurse placed a trembling hand on Marcus's shoulder. "I'm so sorry." The other doctors and specialists in the room remained quiet, exchanging solemn glances. No one spoke, because there was nothing left to say. In their eyes, it was over. Then, in the suffocating silence, my sister's voice cut through like a battle cry. "No, this isn't over," she shouted, stepping forward. Tears streaked her face, but there was an intensity in her gaze that burned brighter than despair. "When man fails, God begins." She grabbed my hand, gripping it tightly, and leaned down to my ear. "You hear me, Ava? God is not finished with you. Breathe. Breathe in Jesus' name." My mother, through her sobs, lifted her hands in prayer. Marcus buried his face in my palm, whispering fervent pleas. The room, once filled with medical calculations and cold procedures, was now flooded with raw, unfiltered faith. They refused to let go. While the doctors stood helpless, my family warred for my life in prayer. And somewhere beyond the veil of this world, I felt it. The darkness that had wrapped itself around me like a thick, suffocating fog suddenly gave way to something vast, something luminous. I was no longer in the hospital room. The pain, the struggle, the weight of my failing body had vanished. Instead, I found myself standing in an expanse that defied earthly understanding. The air shimmered like liquid gold, and a peace deeper than anything I had ever known surrounded me. And then he appeared. A figure stood before me, radiating a brilliance that was not blinding, but warm and all-encompassing. His robe, a dazzling white, seemed to be woven from light itself. His hair was long, flowing in gentle waves, and his eyes, oh, his eyes. They were unlike any I had ever seen before. Deep and ancient, burning with a love so fierce that I felt as though he could see every hidden part of me, yet loved me all the same. I knew instantly who he was. My breath, or whatever I had in this form, caught in my throat. Jesus. He didn't speak, not at first. Instead, he stepped closer, and the very air between us seemed to hum with an energy beyond words. My soul trembled, not with fear, but with awe. I had read about him, prayed to him, even begged for his help in my darkest nights. But never had I imagined this. Never had I thought that I would stand before him like this. Tears welled in my eyes. Am I dead? Jesus gazed at me, and in his eyes I saw galaxies, eternity itself. Then he spoke, and his voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was like a melody, like the sound of a rushing river and a whisper carried on the wind all at once. Not as the world sees death. A shiver ran through me. What did he mean? I looked around at the radiant expanse, at the endless sky filled with hues of gold and sapphire. Where am I? Jesus extended his hand toward me. You have come to see what your heart has longed for. A memory stirred deep within me, something I had nearly forgotten. A prayer whispered in the quiet of my childhood. I suddenly recalled kneeling at my bedside as a little girl, hands clasped tightly, whispering into the silence. Jesus, if heaven is real, can you show me one day? A warmth flooded through me as realization struck. He had remembered. A prayer uttered decades ago, lost in the tides of time. Yet he had never forgotten. My chest swelled with emotion. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could utter a word, the very air around us shifted. The sky parted, revealing something beyond imagination. The sky above was not like any sky I had ever seen. It was endless, a soft golden hue that pulsed with life. It shimmered like liquid sunlight, casting a warm glow upon everything beneath it. But the strangest part? There was no visible source of light. It was as if the very air radiated with divine brilliance. I lowered my gaze to take in my surroundings, and that's when I noticed something even more astonishing. Beneath my bare feet was a surface that defied logic. It was neither solid nor liquid, but something in between, an ethereal plane that supported me while gently shifting underfoot, like stepping upon woven threads of pure light. Every movement sent ripples through it, illuminating the space around me with soft, luminous waves. The sensation was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was warm, comforting, and yet utterly surreal. I looked down at myself. Gone was the hospital gown I had last seen. In its place, I wore flowing robes of the purest ivory, edged with faint, iridescent gold that shimmered like morning mist kissed by the sun. The fabric was weightless, moving as though it were an extension of me, responding to my thoughts rather than the wind. Though there was no wind here, only an atmosphere thick with something indescribable. It was love, peace, holiness. As I adjusted to my new form, I became acutely aware of my heightened senses. Every fiber of my being was attuned to the space around me. I could feel the energy coursing through the ground beneath me, pulsating like a heartbeat. I could hear the hum of existence itself, subtle, melodious, harmonious. It was as if creation was singing, a never-ending hymn of praise that resonated within my very soul. Then, in the distance, something stirred. A great mist began to part, revealing an expanse stretching far beyond what my eyes could fully grasp. The land was covered in a strange, radiant flora, soft and luminescent, yet so rich and vibrant that it made earthly greenery seem pale in comparison. Each blade of grass, each flower, each leaf glowed with an inner light, shifting in hues I had never known before. Colors that did not exist in the mortal realm bloomed before me, swirling and dancing like embers in a celestial fire. A sudden rush of movement caught my attention. Above me, streaks of luminous energy shot through the air, leaving behind trails of shimmering radiance. They moved with purpose, weaving intricate patterns that pulsed and flickered like messages written in divine script. Were they living beings? Messengers? Some form of celestial energy? I couldn't tell, but their presence filled me with awe. One of these streaks suddenly altered its course, heading straight for me. I braced myself, instinctively taking a step back, but the movement was effortless, almost as if I were floating rather than walking. The light grew brighter as it approached, a pulsating sphere of pure energy, humming with an otherworldly resonance. I had a fleeting thought to shield myself, but something deep within told me there was no need to fear. The moment it touched my forehead, a surge of warmth spread through me. Like stepping into the embrace of the sun without pain, only comfort. A rush of knowledge, emotion, and sensation flooded my mind, overwhelming yet peaceful. It was as if this energy had been waiting for me, recognizing me, welcoming me home. I gasped, my senses reeling from the intensity of it. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the transition was complete. I was no longer merely standing in a new place. I was part of it. The very air around me shimmered, as if reality itself had been gently unraveled and rewoven in a single breath. The space I stood in felt both endless and intimate, an expanse of pure light stretching in every direction. But then, as if an unseen hand had pulled back a veil, the light fractured and shifted. A ripple spread across my vision, and in an instant, the blinding brilliance faded. What remained was something indescribably beautiful, a world so vivid, so alive, that my senses could hardly contain it. I found myself standing atop a vast hill, its slope gently rolling into an endless horizon. The ground beneath me was unlike anything I had ever known, soft like silk, yet firm like polished stone. It was alive beneath my feet, humming faintly, as though the very earth was singing a melody too holy for mortal ears. My eyes adjusted to the scene before me, revealing a carpet of delicate blossoms stretching across the hillside. They were unlike any flowers I had seen on earth, their petals translucent and radiating soft light, shifting colors as though responding to the rhythm of the unseen melody. Their hues danced between deep violets, fiery oranges, golden yellows, and iridescent blues, changing in an unspoken harmony. They moved, not from any breeze, for there was none, but as if stirred by the breath of something divine. Beyond the blossoms, a valley sprawled before me, cradled in the arms of distant mountains whose peaks shimmered with an ethereal glow. A great mist curled at the base of the valley, but as I watched, the mist began to part. Not in the way fog disperses in the morning sun, but as if it had been intentionally drawn aside, revealing something hidden beyond human comprehension. A city. Not just a city, the city. It sprawled beneath me, stretching farther than my eyes could see, an architectural masterpiece woven from light and precious metals. At the heart of it stood a structure so magnificent it nearly stole my breath. A grand palace, its towers of ivory and gold reaching toward the heavens, crowned with a dome so radiant it seemed to hold the very essence of the sun within its surface. Its walls pulsed faintly, as though alive, carrying an energy I could feel in my bones. But it wasn't just one building. Countless structures of pure white and gold filled the city, their rooftops adorned with gemstones that reflected light in dazzling arrays of color. Towering spires rose like frozen flames, their tips glowing with an otherworldly luminescence. The entire city exuded harmony, a sense of divine order so perfect that my mind could barely grasp it. And then, in the farthest reaches of my vision, beyond the golden rooftops and pearl-white streets, stood a mountain unlike any I had ever seen. It was covered in trees so impossibly symmetrical they seemed carved by a master artisan. The trees shimmered, their leaves shifting from emerald green to crystalline silver with every passing moment. Above them, the sky was painted in a celestial masterpiece of swirling colors. Sunset hues unlike any I had witnessed on Earth, blending in breathtaking harmony. Fiery reds bleeding into liquid gold, deep purples merging with electric blues, emerald greens interwoven with a heavenly glow. My attention was drawn to the air itself. Glimmering orbs of pure white light floated gracefully across the sky, moving with intelligence and purpose. They wove intricate patterns above the city, tracing designs too complex for my mind to fully comprehend. They weren't random, they were precise, intentional. Then, as I watched in awe, one of the orbs drifted toward the mountain's peak, where it burst into 1,000 brilliant streaks of light. It was as if the heavens had set off fireworks in slow motion, each spark lingering in the air, illuminating everything in its glow. A voice, warm yet commanding, resonated beside me. "It is the glory of the Lord." The words filled me with something I could not explain, a mixture of awe, reverence, and an overwhelming sense of love so deep it brought me to my knees. My body, though weightless, trembled. I could feel the power in those words, as though they carried the very essence of creation itself. And then, a force unlike anything I had ever known surged through me. It was as if an invisible hand gripped my soul, pulling me with a sudden jolt. The radiant city blurred, the celestial melodies faded, and the golden light that bathed everything began to retreat. My spirit trembled as I felt myself being drawn away, back into the realm I had left behind. A rushing sensation, like being pulled through a tunnel of wind and energy, overtook me. The warmth of heaven was replaced by an overwhelming heaviness. The weight of flesh, the limitations of mortality. I gasped, though I had no lungs to fill, and in an instant, everything went black. Then pain. A sharp, suffocating, unbearable pain, dragging me out of the divine embrace and hurling me back into the broken shell of my earthly body. A deafening beeping sound filled my ears, and voices, muffled yet frantic, surrounded me. "She's back. We have a pulse." The brightness was gone. I was no longer floating, no longer wrapped in a love so profound it defied words. Instead, I was trapped in a world of cold and confusion. My eyelids were too heavy to open, but I could hear everything. The clatter of medical instruments, the hurried footsteps, the trembling voices of nurses. "Her vitals are unstable. Stay with us, stay with us." I wanted to speak, to tell them what I had seen, to cry out that I had been somewhere far beyond this fragile existence. But I was caged in silence. My body would not respond. My chest burned with every weak, shallow breath, and I realized that something was pressing against my face, a ventilator. "She needs time. She's a fighter," another voice whispered, filled with quiet desperation. It was a familiar voice, Marcus. My husband. He was here. Tears formed behind my closed eyelids, but they would not fall. The warmth of heaven still clung to me, as if its golden glow had left an imprint on my soul. But now I was back in a world where pain and fragility reigned. My eyelids were heavy, my body weak, yet my mind was painfully alert. Something was missing. No, someone. My baby. A flood of panic surged through me, my chest tightening as I struggled to form words. My lips were cracked dry, unable to move fast enough to demand the answer I so desperately needed. Where was my child? Had he survived? Or had I glimpsed heaven because I was never meant to hold him? A soft rustling broke through my spiraling thoughts. A nurse leaned over me, her face kind but shadowed with exhaustion. "He's alive," she whispered, as if sensing the storm in my heart. "He's in the NICU. He's fighting." Relief and dread tangled inside me. Alive but fighting. The weight of those words settled over me, heavier than my own broken body. The room was dim, a sterile glow casting pale reflections against the medical monitors beside me. A sharp scent of antiseptic filled my nose, mingling with something metallic. I tried shifting my arm, but a deep ache shot through my torso, stopping me cold. That's when I noticed it, and 4 taped to my hand, wires snaking across my chest, and a dull pressure in my abdomen that made it hard to breathe. Something was wrong. Before I could ask, a doctor entered, his face unreadable. He glanced at the nurse before clearing his throat. "You experienced a severe complication during childbirth, an amniotic fluid embolism," he said carefully, as if measuring each word. "It's rare, Anne," he hesitated. "Most don't survive it." His words barely registered. My mind was stuck on one thing. If most don't survive, why did I? "You lost a lot of blood," he continued. We had to perform an emergency C-section, but because of the embolism, your heart, he trailed off, his gaze flickering to the monitor beside me. You were gone for 51 minutes. Gone. The word hung in the air like an unspoken secret. If only he knew just how far I had gone. I closed my eyes, the image of heaven still seared into my mind. The colors, the music, the presence of something greater than anything this world could ever contain. And now, I was back in a hospital bed, stitched together by human hands after being undone by divine ones. The fact that you're here, it's nothing short of a miracle, the doctor admitted, running a hand over his face. We couldn't even administer pain meds at first. Your heart had stopped, and we had to prioritize getting you back. But somehow, even after everything, your vitals are stable. Pain meds. I suddenly realized, despite the emergency surgery, despite the trauma, despite the blood loss, I felt no pain. I should have been writhing in agony, barely able to breathe. Instead, there was only a deep stillness inside me, a strange peace that defied logic. As the doctor spoke in hushed tones with the nurse, my ears caught another sound. Voices beyond the door. Urgent whispers. The steady beeping of machines. The clock on the wall read 6:30 a.m. I listened, barely breathing, as one of the doctors mentioned a name, Dr. Miller. A name I didn't recognize, yet it sent a chill through me. The name echoed in my mind, stirring a memory from the in-between. I had seen him before. Not here. Not in this hospital. But somewhere beyond, in the place where eternity touched the edges of time. And he had been fighting for me. The days that followed were a blur of recovery, but my soul had already been rewritten. I was no longer tethered to the distractions that once consumed me. The things I had once deemed urgent now felt laughably insignificant. Every moment, every second carried weight. The laughter of my newborn boy, the warmth of the sun against my skin, the whispered prayers I once rushed through. All of it was different. Time was no longer something to be conquered, but something to be honored. I had stood in eternity and returned. Not because I was special, not because I was more worthy than others, but because I had been given a message. Heaven is real, and Jesus is waiting.